Hey there, Engine fans! Welcome back to the Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. Our first order of business this week is Hello Neighbor, created by TinyBuild and Dynamic Pixels. Their release is coming up on December 8th, and in celebration of that, they're actually running a mod contest. So you can go to the Epic Games launcher and download their mod kit. You can do full swaps, you can do smaller asset swaps, gameplay changes, anything that you're looking to create and mix up in their game. You can go in, make those changes, and submit it in their contest, and that runs up until launch on December 8th. There are details included on our blog post, so go to unrealengine.com/blog, and you can follow up and see all those contest details there if that's something interesting to you. Also, we released our Montreal Dev Day videos. So a couple weeks ago, we hosted a Dev Day up in Montreal. There are talks from Zach Parrish on performance and profiling your game. There are Paragon texture or texture pipeline details, even some lighting talks. So go check those out. They're a little bit of a deeper dive, and there's a lot of information tucked away there. So definitely go take a look at those. As always, we love to give a huge shout out to our folks that are helping us out on Answer Hub. They're answering questions, offering solutions, and we couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you so much. We'd like to give a huge shout out to Shadow River, Una Unagi, Every Nun, Death Ray, Noctmare, C4TNT, Responian, Redbox, Kai Yoshida, and Slime Q. You guys are the bomb. So our first community spotlight this week is an Egyptian-style interior concept. So it's sort of a throne room. An individual called Su A Hong put it together, and it's just this gorgeous environment. I would love to play a game set in here. It's just really stunning. I love the lighting and the use of colors. It's just a really, really beautiful environment. They spent about 5.5 months on this project, and the work here really shows. So great job. Can't wait to see more stuff that you're working on. Our second spotlight is Hanako, Honor and Blade. It's a, you're traveling through this beautiful fictional 16th century feudal Japan, and you can play as a warrior, and you're going through swordplay. It actually reminds me very much of a Dynasty Warriors kind of feel, run around hacking and slashing people. I love some of their outline, their stylization here, and you're going through this campaign representing a personal trial of life and death of a lost loved one. So there's multiple levels and game modes, and it's up to 24-player online battles. So looks neat. Go check it out. It's in early access, and you can play this game too.
You will have to perfect your skills, master your weapon, to become a deadly force on the battlefield. Play as the fearless Kenshi, the immovable Naginata.
And our third and final spotlight, it's this procedural city that's been created with interiors. So Magnificus, the forum user, created this. It's very much a prototype still, but it builds full interiors. It's all procedurally generated. You can go in, you can see these rooms that are created with assets inside of them. There's a couple different modes here too, where you can set how straight or chaotic you want your roads to be. I just think it's a really amazing use of the technology or of code and what you're able to do. And it's just a really neat thesis that they're working on. And so huge shout out. It's really sweet, and keep up making these really awesome projects. So thank you for joining us for our news and community spotlight. Hey all, welcome to the Unreal Engine livestream. I'm your host, Amanda Bott, and today I have Jerome Platteaux with me. He was the art director for Robo Recall, and he's going to join us talking about all the art
Yeah,
decisions and whatnot that went into making it. So
yeah. How we made up Robo Recall. Yeah,
thank you so much for joining,
sure.
and would you like to dive in?
Yeah, let's go. So yeah, just a bit of information about the talk. So it's a talk that I gave several times this year, right after Robo Recall came out, and then it's been a year now that we announced it. It was in Oculus Connect last year, and then last week was Oculus Connect 4. So we celebrate the first year of Robo Recall announcement. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's dive into the art of Robo Recall and just celebrate a bit of that first year of what's going on.
We've got a lot of great stuff tucked away in this presentation.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for you all to see it.
Cool. All right. Let's switch to the screen right away. All right. So Art of Robo Recall. So today we're going to talk about all the things that we came up with for the Robo Recall. So first of all, what is Robo Recall? And then what are the origin of the project? And then how did we scope the project? And also we're going to talk about the design of the robot and the weapon, and then also the design of the environment. And then a quick overview of the lighting setup that we did. And then also some of the optimization that we did for to make it run in 90 frames per second in stereo. It's always cool. Okay, so what is Robo Recall? For those who don't know, Robo Recall is a first epic game, a VR game that we did. We actually released it last year for the GDC, and it's available for the Oculus Touch only for now. For those people who have a Vive, they actually can download it and buy it on the Oculus Home, but it's available on Vive in theory. So have fun with it. Let me show you the trailer for those people who don't know Robo Recall.
Say hello to the latest member of the Robo-Ready family. Presenting the TAL Series 9. Every bolt, every component has been meticulously designed. TAL will obey any command. It lives to serve.
Sir, this.
We are now getting reports of such robot violence.
TAL features convenient transport handles,
Why did they add handles?
as well as easily replaceable parts,
Hey, I'm using that.
and is built from impact-resistant materials.
Booyah!
Trouble-free service is guaranteed by our Robo Recall program.
Ow, 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 ow. What now? Robot heaven, I see it. Unstoppable.
Making your life better, one robot at a time.
Cool. All right. So what are the origin of the Robo Recall? Why did we do that game? So actually everything started in Oculus Connect in 2015. So for that Oculus Connect, we were doing a tech demo that was called Bullet Train, and then everything was done because they were about to announce and release the Oculus Touch controller. Actually, not release, but just announce it. So we partnered with Oculus, and they asked us to do that tech demo. And I was, our best attempt at it is to do that bullet train, where it's kind of like it's a short version of Robo Recall, or what Robo Recall was going to become. So it was a small team, like 12 people, and then we had around 10 weeks to do that tech demo. And we actually reused a lot of assets from our previous Epic project, you know. And we actually even bought some assets for the marketplace, like the weapons. And then the only thing new that we created was that new environment, the train station and the train interior. And then so we learned a lot from that tech demo. It was very useful for us. So first of all, what was good and what worked from that tech demo. So from that, we learn our budget, like how many draw core can we afford and how many polygon can we afford. So the we wanted to make sure the tech demo would run on the minimum spec that Oculus recommended, which was a 970 GTX 970 and then an i5 CPU. So from that, we're like, okay, it looks like we can afford around 1,000 recall and 1.5 million polygon. And then we also learned a lot about the overall feeling of what works in VR. For example, we know that we feel like a lot of element put together, I mean layered element, feels nice because you're always slightly moving, and then so having a good sense of depth is great, like layering them and then having a sense of scale. So it's the same element that get repeated overall. You get a good sense of distance and in VR. So that was a great thing. And then, like I just said, like the sense of scale was really important in VR. Make sure, for example, when you are next to a table, the table feels the right thickness, and all those stuff adds up together to make the overall experience a lot more immersive. So paying attention to all those little details pays off at the end. And then another thing that feels nice was the reflection in VR, because same thing, we're always slightly moving, so having reflection and then specular dancing on top of the surface was making everything a lot more richer, and then had a lot more detail. And then also Unreal Engine is pretty good at doing reflection overall. Our shader model is pretty nice for that. And also the other thing is bright environment feels good in the HMD. So we have like a lot of still some worry and then some pattern that we can see in the headset. But when you have something like a bright image, it doesn't show up as much. So having something bright feels nice. And then also we saw that having too much contrast in your image was creating some sort of glare, and then those are artifacts that were kind of like annoying when you play. So having like a completely black background and with just white text on it, you're going to see a lot of glare at the bottom of your eye. So trying to avoid that was one of the goal with making everything brighter. So that's kind of like all the things that we learned that were kind of working. And then also one important thing is touch controller are awesome. So we knew that from now on, every VR experience or VR game, we would want to use those those touch controller. So grabbing things in VR is awesome. And then we also learned a lot of things that didn't work. So what was not good? So first of all, we also learned that actually 1,000 recall and 1.5 million polygon is actually not that much. So the budget is not that big to do a game in VR. And then things that we faked and tricked. I think we did a stream with Ryan Brooks last year about how we did all the fake reflections. So our goal was actually to not do the same trick. Like we couldn't afford to do the same trick for every object in the scene. So the goal was to figure out a way to have nice reflection now and avoid that trick. And then we also didn't have any dynamic shadow. We used kind of like a blobby shadow for that bullet train demo, and then we're like, that'd be great to move forward and have something that's nicer than that. And then also one thing that we learned is that people were feeling kind of like bad shooting at human. Like I know those characters, they don't have faces, but they have every proportion tells us that there's probably human under that suit. So people were feeling bad shooting at them. So that's something that we wanted to avoid for the next demo, is actually make sure the character are robots or something else than human, either zombie, robots, or monster, whatever we would come up with. And then a few months later, so we got contacted with Oculus. They were super happy with all the demo that we did, and they're like, yeah, you guys, you should do a game. And then the team was super excited. So we say, you know what, let's put a team together and let's do a full game in VR. And here we go. So how did we scope the game to do? How did we scope to do the big project? So first of all, we knew that we started globally just maybe the months after the GDC in 2016. Yep, 2016, the month after GDC, we're like, okay, we know we want to release in the next 12 months, and we know we want to have still have a small team. So basically 15 people as a core, and then probably some contractor that would come and help us. And then we know we wanted to have the game running on the minimum spec from the Oculus that the Oculus recommended. And then we also wanted to make sure the actual experience would look as good as we can. So raise the bar visually. And then it would be our first game in VR for us. So a lot of things that we didn't have to carry or care in the bullet train demo was okay, no scoring, no player progression. So all that stuff now we have to think about that. Okay, the game pillar. So game pillar were actually a very important stage for us. It's helped us to define what is our game. So we want it to be like all those pillars would be used along the project, and then always all the new decision would be compared to the game pillar. If I create this asset or if I create this gameplay, does it fit with the game pillar that we defined? So those pillars are very, very important. And then it's kind of like defining everything that we want to stick with, and then define the overall experience. So first of all, what we want is we want you to be the one. Like people were reacting really well to the Neo effect in Bullet Train, like the way they can catch the bullet and throw the bullet back, and then stop the time or slow down the time. So we want you to be the biggest badass of all. So that was very important. So anything that create any new move, it would be to be the biggest badass. And then we wanted to have this kind of arcade feeling, something that where it's fun, you play right away, you have a lot of fun right away, and it's overall very colorful, and then it's very welcoming, you always like to come back. And then we also wanted to have the experience overall very grounded. So because it's VR, people are not completely used to it, and then so we want to have something that's people are easy to recognize and easy to understand where they are. For example, when you are in the street, you kind of like already have a good sense of how big is the street, kind of like how everything works. So you don't have to explain or spend too much time on indicating where the player has to go. So having a street is just easy. Everybody know how to act in the street. And then we wanted to have the experience to be unique to the device. So anything what can we do in VR with those controllers that cannot be done with regular game. And then we also wanted to have that 20-minute micro loop. So we want to have that intense gameplay with a lot of progress in 20 minutes. And then after that, you just can take off your headset and rest a little bit. Because at that time, we didn't know how long people would play and how long people would be able to stay in VR. So what we learned is globally, people can actually stay a little bit longer. Like 20 minutes it's a good core, but what we noticed is that people play actually twice 20 minutes. So a 40-minute is actually what we saw the most on average. Okay, let's jump on to the design of the robots. So it's another thing that I wanted to do is kind of like defining what are the to-do things and not to-do things for the weapon and the robots. So the robot should not look like human in suit. Like I said earlier, for the bullet train, people were feeling bad about it. So we didn't want to feel like, okay, there's a human under that suit. So we want to make sure the character looks like robot. We don't look like robot with
Don't wanna look like people
human
inside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with people inside, basically. So we don't feel bad shooting at them, basically. We wanted to be keep the experience light-hearted and with bright color, with lots of cool animation and fun sounds. So when you shoot a robot, it doesn't say it doesn't scream, but more like ouch, ow, that type of sound. And then we still wanted to have the robot to look badass, though. Like even it's just more satisfying to shoot a robot that he's badass than just a weak one. And then we wanted to have a lot of variety in movement and size, movement, size, and speed. So because we are in headset in VR, you can look around really quickly. So we need to have the thread that comes from every direction and different size and different speed. Okay, so let's go with the main biped. So it's our main guy. So we want it to be slightly bigger than the average human. So when you stand next to him, is kind of like an imposing guy. Especially for me, I'm not very high, so it's even more imposing. So that was kind of like the first step. Is we went with, I don't know if people can see. We actually started with like, okay, this one sounds like a good start with our robots. And then we started to decline those drawing into a lot of variations. So for this case, we actually started to say, you know what, well, let's narrow it down to this guy, and then let's put some color on it, and then put some clothes on it. So that we end up with this character. So what I wanted also is to have the character to express a lot of emotion, so that when they stand, they feel pretty badass, and then they can paint their face so they look a bit more scary. Let's go to the next one. And then I want them to have a lot of attitude, so when they pose, they just look cool and badass. And then we also had to do the crawler and the drone bots. So because we had that tall guy, now let's try to find a place for the smaller one. So we want it to be small, but not too small. Because when it's too small, it's just super hard to shoot at it. So we need to find a good size, a good average size for like a medium range distance. And then also this guy, he needed to look kind of like a big spider, a bit creepy, so we could hear him like running after you or coming in the back. And then at some point we wanted him to actually crawl on the wall, but we didn't have time to do all that. So at least it's a small spider, it jump in your face.
I think you guys nailed that.
Yeah.
Because every time I got in, I was just like,
Those guys are so
why?
creepy sometimes. But you can also actually grab them, and then the goal with every robot, if you look at all the design, is all the robots have a way to being grabbed. So there's a handle on all the important part of the robots. And then if we wanted to have the one on the floor crawling, and then we also wanted to have like kind of like the one, like the drone one. So it's just reusing the crawler, removing the legs, and then putting some kind of like turbine on top of it. So this one was a easy way to reuse the asset. And then we have the big bots. So again, we have the human size, the smaller one, and let's have the big one. So of course we want it to be big, but not too big, because in VR when something is way too big, we start to lose the sense of scale. So again, we did a lot of iteration. What is the good size? Too big but not too big, basically. And then this one will be kind of like the big guy, and then you act very slow. And then also we wanted to be able to hijack him. So for example, on this one you can teleport on top of it, and then kind of control him, and then be able to reuse his own gun. Basically, it's kind of like the Ratatouille, where you kind of pilot the human, the rat pilot the human with the hair. So we didn't pull the hair, but it's kind of like the same idea. And then, so we have the fast bot. So again, we have human, the small one, the drone, the big one, and then we just have the one size in the middle that we didn't have. That something that's a bit smaller than human, like size of a tall kid, I would say. And then the goal with this one would be that he runs really fast. So he runs fast and teleport around you. And then we would have some more like feminine shape, I would say. And then this one was the idea is that he runs fast around you when you shoot at it. He's teleporting, so you can really never really shoot at it unless you teleport and then actually grab it and then start to shoot it. And then you can actually also steal he has a leash, and then you can grab his leash and then use that leash against the other robots. That was a cool one. And then we have the flying bot. So this one is kind of like something like a bit big, and he's kind of like the kind of like a motor, so you can teleport next to it and reuse that and then shoot rocket from it. So the goal was to make it slightly imposing. And then he would be the one that actually not very agile on the ground, but flies very fast. So if flies, land, you can teleport and shoot with him, but doesn't really crawl or moves on the floor. So the only way he's doing like those big flying around, big landing, flying around, big landing. And then so we had to make it with very powerful, very big engine on the side. And then he's kind of like the ugly one of the group, so he would act like a Quasimodo guy, like. Yeah. So that was another fun one to do. And then the final boss. So the problem with the final boss is we were running out of time. So we didn't have time to do actually a lot of concept on it, and then so what we did is we just reused the final boss that we use in Robo Recall, and then tweak it to make it look a bit closer to our not Robo Recall, from Bullet Train to make it look like the Robo Recall asset. So basically having that same color variation, which is white, yellow, and then dark overall for the interior. So once we have all those concepts, at the same time we were actually doing the proto mesh. So proto mesh were actually like very low resolution, or not really low, but very rough modeling. So the good thing with that is we were able to iterate fast with a very simple shape, and then import that into the Unreal Engine, and then stand next to it and see what works and what doesn't work. And then with the modeler, Pete Hayes and Mark Van Hexma, we were actually looking at the robot, and we were like, okay, maybe if the torso was a bit bigger, or maybe what if we had more like negative space, so that when I'm standing next to it, I can actually still see something going on behind the robot. So those proto mesh were really useful to iterate and find the right balance and what looks good in VR, because it's always different from what you see on the screen and what you actually feel in VR. So.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like finding the overall proportion. So one thing that was great for this robot is when you stand next to him, we had that very narrow hips, and then the goal was to be able to see through that robot, so you can still shoot at the other threat coming up that are standing behind him. And then also the other thing is always looking at your asset in VR is telling you what is the most the part that are the most view of your asset. For example, if I'm standing next to this robot, I'm kind of like looking down to that robot. So I see that globally all the detail needs to be around the neck and around her face. And then, for example, if I go back to this guy, we know that all the detail needs to be around the bottom, the top of his legs, because when you stand next to him, your face is globally at this height, and then for her, your face is globally at this height. So finding where you want to put all your money, basically, where you want to put all your polygon. And then also those proto mesh were useful because we wanted to find the interaction point. Where do we place the handle? Where do we place the trigger to hit actually trigger the missile that comes out of this guy, for example. And then at the same time, the good thing with those proto mesh is that the animator can actually start to create all the animation set, and also all the designer can actually start to iterate and play the game while we're actually doing the high resolution. So proto mesh phase is really important. And then one thing that we need to pay attention is when you do those proto mesh, they look very primitive, but they actually have the same amount of vertices as the final budget that we want. So for example, the average budget for the robots were around 30,000 polygon. So when the goal with that is when you swap the low-res asset, what looks low-res, into the high-res asset, which is the final one, you don't have surprise with the performance. So you don't go from 10 or 5,000 polygon to 30,000. You need to have your proto mesh to be already in the rough ballpark of your final asset in terms of polygon. So let's go over some of the final assets just to look at how they were finished. So that's our final proto mesh on the main robot. So it was actually really close, and we were able to play the game most of the time with that proto mesh. And then the same with high res. So it was modeled in ZBrush and 3ds Max. And then we use Marvelous Designer to do the clothes. The game asset were modeled in 3ds Max, and actually the LOD were generated in Unreal Engine 4. So we actually only did the high res, the LOD 0 in Max, and then all the variation of LOD were not touched at all in Max. It was all generated in Unreal Engine. And then the other thing is we wanted to have 2 to 3 sets of texture per character. So we wanted to keep the amount of draw call as low as possible. So we divided into like three pieces, like the upper body, the head, because there was a lot of detail that needs to be around the head and the neck, and then the lower body. And then the texture were done in Substance Painter. So since all the robots have kind of the same amount of material is always like the same chromy and metallic and then white paint. So we did just a material bank basically and tried to reuse them over all the assets. And then we had to do the gore pieces because the cool thing with Robo Recall is you can teleport, grab the head and tear the robots apart. So we had to create those gore pieces for dismemberment and also during the explosion. And that's our final asset. So on the right side, it's actually rendered in Unreal Engine. Same for the fast bot. For what we call the big bot. We didn't come up with any name for them. We just call them fast bot, big bot, biped. Okay, so let's go over the design of the weapon. Okay, so same thing like going back to the bullet train demo where people were feeling bad shooting at the human. We were like, okay, we want to keep the arcadey feeling. So each weapon should be kind of halfway between a toy and a real weapon. So something that feels nice and then realistic, but at the same time not too realistic. And then also one thing that we learned is we don't want the weapon to be too big because there's no sense of weight in VR. So the only weight you have is your controller. So if you have a massive, long weapon, then you do that, it looks like a giant stick moving around. So you don't want that. So we had some solution to kind of like imply some weight. So there's like kind of like a lag happening when you move your weapon. There's kind of a slow around it or around your wrist. But the goal was to maintain something that's maybe a feet and a half, not bigger than that. And then also the other thing is we wanted to have a one-handed weapon. So because when you have your controller, there's no way to constrain the two controllers together. And then in Robo Recall we had a weapon that needed to be held by the two hand, but a lot of people were just doing a lot of things like that. So we're like, you know what? Let's get rid of it and then just focus on one-handed weapon. And it allows you to do a lot of gunfu shot. And then also one thing is during the game there's a lot of unlock that you can do. So you have a mission, you get some unlocked some attachments. So it's just to improve the weapon. So you get a laser, you get more ammo and all that type of thing. So we had to make sure that all the attachment works on top of the base weapon. And then for the weapon, we actually did exactly the same process as the robot. So we started with the proto mesh, see how it looks in VR, feels good, not too big, not too small, and then be able to play and kind of like see how it feels. And then at the same time, when we were happy with that, we just triggered the high-res modeling. So what about the hand? So in the game, we never really define if you're human, if you're a robot. So it's kind of like up to you. So we didn't say anything about that. So you just play as yourself. And also, some people were complaining, why there is no harm? Well, it's kind of actually a complicated things to feel because in VR and with the touch, you just don't have all the indication of how your arm position is. So you just have the position of the headset, you just have the position of actually your hand, and then where is your elbow? It can be here, here, here. So we're like, and then we have very complicated interaction with the robot. So you grab the robot, you tear the head, you grab his hand, so it would be too complicated to make it look good. So instead of having like a spaghetti of polygon going on in front of your face, we just went with just floating hands. It felt better, and also it's a lot less complicated, and then we didn't have to spend too much time on figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
Design of the environment. So again, one of the pillars was make it overall look grounded. So I wanted to base the environment on real places. So, and then the good thing with when you base your environment on real places is at least you know you have the good proportion right away. So you know how big is the building, how big is the road, how thick is the curb and all that stuff. So you don't have to constantly verify it. You just take a bunch of photos, and if it match, it just match. And then it's also, again, it's because it's based on some sort of real places, it's just easier to find references. And then on top of it, the goal was to put some futuristic element that would help to kind of set the time like more futuristic, and it would be useful for the gameplay. And it just looked cool too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, environment test. So what feels good in VR? So during that GDC 2016, I decided to go in San Francisco and take a bunch of photogrammetry, some bunch of photo of a street that I really liked. And then it kind of allowed us to create some really quick and simple assets that were kind of looking real at least, but they were kind of very rough quality. But we were able to start to play in an environment that feel kind of good in VR, and then kind of like allow us to have a good sense of scale compared to just having some gray box. And then at least by having based on photogrammetry, we had good proportion. So it was a good play, a good way to evaluate what we will need later. So by taking all those buildings that I took the photo of and then duplicating them all over, it was kind of a way to see how many buildings we would need, like how many high-res buildings we would need at the end. And of course, when you're in VR, you scope and you look around all the time, so you need a lot of variations. And also, it was a kind of a quick way to see how the robot would look like in the streets. So, but the streets were kind of empty, so we realized like we need to dress up those streets with a lot of little props. So we're going to need a lot of props overall. So of course, since we need a lot of props, it would be just, and we are a small team, we need to outsource. There would be too many assets to do by ourselves. So what did we outsource and how we did it? So the only assets that we outsourced were the asset based on photo. So any asset that are based on photo, it's just easy to see. If they match the photo, it just works. When it's kind of based on a concept art have a lot of interpretation, so it would be just more confusing. So having everything based on photo was just clear for everybody and easy to follow. And then what we wanted is each asset would need to be modular, so but not too much. Sorry, going back to that. You want it to be modular, but not too much, so that you don't end up with thousands of assets just for that facade, but having like a good set of assets that you can move it around and create a new version of this facade. And then same thing, we wanted to have the facade to be the same budget as the robot, basically, so around 30,000 vertices. And then again, 1 or 2 sets of map, and they would be done in Substance Painter and Designer. Again, like having less map equal less draw call. And then we wanted to have the interior of the windows as a separate material. I will show you why later in the presentation. And then we wanted to have the collision be part of the asset too. So what worked? So it was great because the company that we choose was actually doing a great job. So we also had somebody in China because we are outsourced it into a Chinese company. And one of the Epic guys was there to actually verify and make sure all the assets were following and matching all the requirements. And then the good thing is it was a scalable team. So we were gathering all the assets on our side, making sure everything is looking nice, but we were taking it and set dressing the environment based on all those little pieces. So it was a great way to scale the team. So if we need more assets, we ask them to just scale their team and then send all those assets back in maybe less than a week sometime. So that the good thing is it'll allow us to focus on the actual art and not spending time on, okay, I need to model another trash can, or I need to model another curb, and it's just like, okay, all that stuff is put and done somewhere else, and then we gather all those great assets and then focus on making all meld together and look good. But what didn't work also when you outsource is the optimization part, because you never know how the asset's gonna be put together. So the optimization needs actually to be done internally when the set dress is done, the set dressing is done, and then when everything is in a lock state, and then we're like, okay, now we are ready to optimize. And then just some quick shot about the our environment, just to show you how it looks.
These are so gorgeous. The team did such a wonderful
Yeah,
job with it.
we had an awesome team.
Amazing.
And then so some quick tips and tricks how we did the overall things. For example, like I was talking earlier, we separated the interior, the material that is the interior of the windows, because we had a special shader for that. It kind of like fake the geometry, so it's actually just a face, and then the interior is like a sort of a parallax. Let me show you after. It's going to be easier to understand. So we had that fake parallax going on. So we had that shader, and then we can replace the interior of the windows with another like 360 snapshot that we did of like a room. So you have this. It's actually just a face like that. One face per window. And then one thing that felt nice in VR, so we were trying to get as less draw color as possible. So that means we have maybe a map, a texture map, a 2K by 2K, that cover actually a lot of surface. For example, this robot had only 2 or 3 maps. So when you're up close, you can still see some of the texture being kind of low res. So the goal was to actually, anywhere you look, you should have a sense of detail. So we had that detailed texture on everything in our VR assets. So for the environment, and then even for the robot, we use that same texture on everything. So when you're up close, there's always a sense of grainy something going on. And then another thing that we find out is when you tweak your roughness map, you need to always check them in VR, because your head is always slightly moving. So something that doesn't always feel shiny enough on your 2D screen might actually feel very shiny in VR. So since your head is always moving, you have the specula always kind of like dancing or moving on top of the object. And in VR, it feels like, okay, it's shiny enough, it's good. And that's something that it's not always the case on your monitor. So again, always check back in VR. Let's go over the lighting. So pretty regular lighting rig. Since we have a very strict performance requirement, we couldn't only afford static lighting. So nothing too complicated, nothing dynamic. So we started with, of course, static skylight, and then stationary directional light. That would be the only one that has a shadow. And then we use regular like cube map reflection capture. And then we had the environment light mixing on all the way, so from 0 to 1. So what does that mean is anything that is dark in the light maps is actually being dark in the reflection. So it's kind of like a fake reflection occlusion. So usually the light mixing doesn't go all the way to on the material. So usually the very shiny material actually get the reflection occlusion from the screen space reflection. But since we couldn't afford any like screen space filter or screen space effect, we were because we were in forward runner, we actually extended all that light mixing all the way to from 0 to 1. And then we use that new feature, it's the planar reflections. So it was really useful. So the idea is you get the overall lighting and the overall reflection with the regular tool. So like we use the reflection capture, but sometimes you want extra detail or something that moves that is animated, and this is where we use the reflection capture. So the goal is not to put the entire environment in your reflection capture, but only the one that are really useful. And then, for example, for the robots, we wanted them to reflect on the environment. So anytime there's a robot that is spawned, the asset is actually put in the list of the reflection capture. The planar reflection, sorry. So anytime you spawn a robot, boop, we put that guy into the list of objects that we need to be reflected. So again, you only, because it's kind of expensive, we only want to have what is the most effective in the reflection. So where you need some contact and the robots. And then even by not putting everything in the reflection capture, it was still very heavy. So the goal was to separate into different reflection capture. So the good thing with Robo Recall is you don't move, you actually teleport. So you don't move forward like there's like a blink between each move. So you teleport, so that means we can deactivate one planar reflection and activate another one. So that's what I'm trying to show on that image is like, imagine the guy teleporting from the top part to the middle part and then to the last part. So we actually trigger different planar reflection and only have one visible at the time. So it's only reflecting not the entire environment, or not even, it just reflects a group, a subset of asset that we predefine. And then also we use a capsule shadow for the direct lighting. So again, capsule shadow are great because they're actually pretty inexpensive. And then they also give you a lot of detail, I mean, some contact actually, some contact shadow in the shadow part. So and then another thing that we have on is a single sample shadow on your asset. So it just allows for faster shadow computation on movable object. Another thing that we had was the multiple environment scenario. So because the game was actually, we were a small team and we only did 3 environments, and they would be sort of fatigued by coming back to the same environment. So the goal was to actually do a daytime and nighttime version of the environment. So it just feels less repetitive when you play the same mission again and again. So the good thing is we use that new lighting scenario. So the goal was to have one environment and then multiple lighting scenario that would be triggered on and off at loading time. So the good thing is having multiple lighting scenario means you have more content variation, daytime, nighttime, and then actually a bit of slightly different gameplay. So some people play slightly differently at nighttime than daytime. So it was kind of a double win. Okay, optimization and anti-aliasing fixes. Let me take a break. So forward runners, that's something that was developed for Robo Recall. So we used to be of course in the defer renderer for bullet train, and then we actually developed the forward renderer for Robo Recall. So few good things that come with it, of course, is faster overall, and also the most important thing was the MSAA. So the good thing with MSAA, if you have the asset that works with MSAA, they tends to have a better image clarity. So some asset might have some problem, like when you get like slightly too close on an angle, so you might have to actually adjust some of your asset because of that. But the overall image clarity was a big win. So instead of using temporal A, switching to the MSAA was giving overall a better image clarity. And then the other good thing with forward render was the kind of specialized rendering feature. For example, we can turn off the high quality reflection per shader. We can actually remove the roughness so it's not evaluated. So having those little things can optimize the overall render. And then some bad thing came with it. So the MSA tend to be slower when you have a lot of subpixel geometry. So that's why we need to pay attention to that. I'll show you later how to fix it. And then we also had a lot of specular aliasing with the MSA. So we have some way to fix that too. I'll go over it. Another question that we have a lot is, so when do you optimize your VR project? All the time. All the time. That's the problem with it. So you have to be around 90 frames per second all the time. If not, your team could get motion sickness while testing the game. So it's kind of a bad thing if you can't even play your own game. So even quick and rough optimization are good. Keep your budget under control all the way of the production. Okay, project optimization. I think Nick went over that like 2 or 3 months ago, but I'll reiterate on that. So the idea is you can put all your variable in the console variable. So if you go into your project, if you go into Windows, Developer Tool, Device Profile, and you click on the Windows icon, this is where you can put all your variable to get rid of the screen space reflection, screen space ambient occlusion, get rid of the motion blur, set the size of the shadow resolution, etc. So it's a good place to save all those variables. Scene optimization. So what did we do to optimize our project overall? So first one, obvious one, is the distance cutting. So I don't know if you guys can see it really well, but the overall idea is that anything that's small or smaller than a certain size that is defined is just culled out. It's not even rendered. So when you're too far from a small object, it's just not even rendered. So we have distance cutting on. And then, of course, some LODs. So most of the LODs were done in engine. So the goal is to always do an LOD in engine. If it doesn't look good, then we go back into Max or Maya and then refine it. So for that case, the cars, we needed to refine them in Max, for example. But for example, the robots, we actually never had to refine them. And then the goal is also, like I said earlier, the MSA tend to go to be kind of expensive when you have a lot of subpixel vertices. So basically, what you want to do is reduce the quad overdraw. So to do that, you have to do some LOD for your environment. So you can see the top image, that's the original, and then after some LOD, and get rid of all those overdraw. And then the good thing is, by reducing the overdraw, you're actually reducing the aliasing kind of at the same time, so it's a double win. So spend some time on LOD is always a good thing. We also use the HLOD, so hierarchical LOD. So the idea with that is all the assets are next to each other. We can kind of like do a cluster of them and then regenerate another asset based on this group of assets. So that's something that is done almost automatically. So you have to grab all the assets that you want them to be together, and then there's a HLOD tab in the engine, and you say, okay, all those ones, just merge them together and then regenerate, like do a voxelization, render all the texture and reapply that on the new asset. And then so that's how you can go from 250,000 polygon to less than 10K triangle. So that's another great feature in the engine. And then another way to optimize is merge, just simple merge. Sometimes there's a lot of assets that are next to each other that could just be merged together. They share the same material. And the good thing with that is you merge all the assets together with the same material. He ends up with one material for all those assets. So it's another way to optimize and have a less draw call. And then also try to keep your shader complexity very simple. So having things baked, when something is really complicated, just bake all that graph into one texture if you can. And then aliasing fixes for MSA. So I don't know if you can see it really well. So the idea is what was the idea about that? Oh yeah. So the idea is like the temporal A is kind of our best solution for anti-aliasing. So when you have a very strong highlight, the temporal A would tend to blur it and then make it look good. But since we moved to the forward runner, we are now using the MSA. So the specular is becoming kind of a problem. So how do we tackle that problem? So the idea is actually taking our roughness map and then looking at your what's it called, the normal map, and then so we kind of like detect the edge of the asset, and any edge gets a lot rougher. So what does that mean is by being more rough, you actually spread the specular that is on the edge to a wider or even sometimes completely delete it. So what does that mean is like now you don't have any specular accumulating on those edges, and it looks it doesn't alias anymore. So here's how it looks. So it's not very obvious, but the idea is to looking here. When you're here and you're in the headset, you actually tend to see that, and it's kind of like I don't know how to say that, but very like jittery. And then by making those spreading across a longer distance, you kind of like smear it, so it feels less aliasing. Again, finding the edges with the normal map using the composite texture that is in that roughness map, and then applying the normal map on it, and then you can set that to pretty high, and you should see really white thing coming up. That means now it's very rough, and I'm spreading the specular on a longer distance. Cool. So all the things that I talked about today is actually available to everybody, because we wanted to make sure people can do modding and then open up and see how we did all the games. So almost all the assets are actually, the entire assets are available to you. And if you go into the modding area of the launcher and you go onto Robo Recall and you install the mod, you can see everything. So there's some assets that are not available. It's because there's a copyright on it. So you can see them, but you cannot double click. It's probably because there's a link to a copyright going on. So I apologize for that, but yeah, we need to we need to protect that. And then, but there's so much more I would love to talk about. So there's a lot of things that are interesting in VR. So how the UI work in VR with the touch controller. We had some interesting thing going on. We have the main menu when you select your mission. We have the HUD, so what happens when you kill somebody, and then where the score goes. And then we also have that holo table where you can, it's kind of like a, what's it called? Iron Man table where you see all the city and you can select which part of the town you want to go and teleport. And then another great thing in VR is the audio. So you have specialized sound. So when you look at a direction and you hear somebody walking behind you, all those stuff are very interesting. And then we also had dynamic music where when you progress into the world, there's some intense moments, so the music go stronger and more exciting. And then we also had a cinematic going on at the beginning of the game. So we had to tackle what is storytelling in VR, how does it work? And then, yeah, so there would be a full talk just on that. So I'd like to thank everybody on the team. We had an awesome team. Pete, Mark, Ignacio, Aaron, Scott, Daniel, Ed, Grayson, Tommy, Daniel, and etc. Everybody. So that's
all
it.
those amazing people. Well, thank you. That was certainly a wealth of information.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. There's
Cool.
so much going on.
Yeah.
We do have, I'm going to pick out a few questions. We don't have a whole lot of time.
Yep.
Because you're really good at nailing that, like an
I
hour.
say 1 hour.
You know
How
it.
much are we? Almost there.
Like 57 minutes. So you mentioned that we didn't use ARMS. Is there any plans to do anything with that, or we've
No.
completely stopped?
No, I think
Yeah.
Robo Recall is in a state where we're not planning on touching it too much.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we had the mod. So we are hoping that the community will keep on making it alive, keeping it alive, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and create whatever they want with
Try
it.
new things.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're talking about hand making some fake reflections. So could you talk about that a little more? Or?
So we used to have fake reflection in the bullet train demo, but now
Mhm.
we're using the planar reflection, so we don't fake it anymore. So that's a new feature that is
Gotcha.
in the new Unreal Engine, basically.
I see. They're curious. I'm sure it's a mix of size, but like on average, did you tend to use larger texture sizes or smaller? So they're asking about, similar to Paragon, did you use tileable textures only?
Oh, yes.
Or try to keep them?
It's actually a mix. So the goal was never have a texture bigger than 2K by 2K.
Okay.
The 4K are just not allowed at all. And then, of course, on top of it, we had that detail texture that was a tile texture. So it's a mix of like maximum of 2K texture with tiling texture on top.
Okay. So they're saying that they felt like planar reflections seemed to have some limitations with roughness. Was there anything special we used there? And what about the performance costs related to VR in regards to that?
Not sure I understood that question.
Okay.
The planar reflection, the only limitation is how much do you want to reflect, basically. It's like if you put too much object, it would be very costly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that you need to pay attention to. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, you need to be on the planar element. If you have hills and valley, you can't use planar reflection, of course.
Mm-hmm. Now there was some use of normal maps. Did we use normal maps to fake any like really big details, or was it just?
Oh yeah, that's a good question actually, because that's the only thing where in like just a 2D screen, normal map, you can get a lot out of it. But when you're in VR, those normal map looks very flat.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really balance between how close we want to be to the object, and then that means we need to model a little bit more than we would have done on a regular game. So yeah, the only answer is look at your object and then pick out what is important. Like, do you want to see the small bump, or can it just be in a normal map? So yep, having the asset in VR and look at it and see how close you are is the only way you can define and determine that. As long as anything fits in your budget, you might have to model it, basically.
Okay. And then, all right. Did we hide anything in Robo Recall? Are there some Easter eggs tucked away?
Oh, yeah, we have few. We have title that were not approved. I think they are hidden under the desk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't remember the title we wanted. Shooty Gun Hand was in there.
Yeah.
And then we put some Easter egg. Like, I think we put some photos. I think we put some photo of the team.
Yeah.
So you need to find that somewhere in the hub.
Was there some pictures in like some of the mugs?
Oh yeah. And then
Like
there's one picture of Jeremy, who every 1,000 mugs you're gonna see a picture of him. So
like if you
every
inside
time,
of it,
yes,
right?
it's inside of it. So every time I play the game, I'm just grabbing all the mugs and hopefully find it. So I think so far like 2 or 3 people in the team found it, but can't wait to see more.
That's amazing. Any last bits you want to say? We should.
No, most of the question can be answered by opening the mod editor and then look at how we did everything. So that was the idea, is like we want to help the community and then actually grab it, see how we did it, and steal it.
Perfect. That's the best way to learn, is to dive
yeah.
in and really
Yeah.
start trying it on your own and seeing
Yep.
how you can break it and
Yep.
how we put it together.
Yep.
And
We're butt naked on the internet, so.
yeah. Well, thank you again so much
Sure.
for joining us. As always, we have our NVIDIA Edge program that's ongoing, so submit your projects. We always love to see what you're doing. Also, the Epic Mega Jam is coming up in a couple weeks, so get ready for that. We're actually probably going to do a preparation stream ahead of time, so if you're curious about how to get started, be on the lookout for that. Again, that's November 2nd through 9th. And I've also tossed a link to our live stream survey. Let us know how we're doing, what topics you'd like to see in the future. And again, follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and all the other social media spots. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
See you.
Bye.